The humidity in Chicago that night was heavy enough to wear like a wet coat, pressing against the windows of the Gilded Steer, one of the city's most exclusive steak. Inside, the air was conditioned to a crisp chill, smelling of aged beef, expensive cologne, and old money. For Michael Brown, the contrast was a physical shock every time he walked through the kitchen doors. At 34 years old, Michael walked with a slight limp in his left leg, a souvenir from a collapsed beam in a warehouse fire 3 years ago tonight. The pain wasn't from the old injury. It was the exhaustion of working a 24-hour shift at Station 51, followed immediately by a shift hauling trays of martinis and ribeyes to people who spent more on a single bottle of wine than Michael made in a week. He wasn't doing this for the glory. He was doing it for the girl with the hazel eyes waiting at home in a rented hospital bed. His daughter Lisa had turned 7 last week, a birthday celebrated with a small cupcake and a new oxygen mask. The diagnosis was a rare degenerative lung condition, a cruel irony for a man who spent his life breathing in smoke to save others. The new treatment protocol, an experimental drug therapy not fully approved by his union insurance, cost $9,000 a month. Michael had sold his truck, refinanced his small house in the suburbs, and picked up every overtime shift available, but the math still didn't work. That was why he was here, wearing a stiff white shirt that felt like a straitjacket, forcing a smile he didn't feel. The restaurant manager, a nervous man named James Smith, who sweated profusely, even in the air conditioning, snapped his fingers near Michael's face. He pointed urgently toward the VIP corner booth, the one upholstered in burgundy leather that was reserved for the city's elite. Table 4, brown. Now, James Smith hissed, wiping his forehead with a handkerchief. That's Robert Williams. He owns half the Skyline. If you mess this up, don't bother coming back tomorrow. He's already sent back to servers. Michael took a deep breath, centered himself the way he did before breaching a burning door, and approached the table. Robert Williams looked exactly like his pictures in the financial columns, though older and harder in person. He was a man in his late 50s with silver hair, cropped close, and a face carved from granite, wearing a suit that cost more than Lisa's medical equipment. He didn't look up when Michael arrived. He was scrolling through a tablet, his brow furrowed in irritation. Michael placed the water glass down with the precision of a surgeon, ensuring not a drop spilled, and waited. Silence stretched for an uncomfortable 20 seconds before Robert finally slammed the tablet face down. I ordered sparkling water with a twist of lime. Not a wedge, Robert barked, his voice gravelly and sharp. A wedge leaves pulp. I despise pulp. Michael didn't flinch. He had been screamed at by panicked victims and aggressive captains. A rich man complaining about fruit didn't register on his fear scale. My apologies, Mr. Williams. I'll correct that immediately. Mikhail said, his voice steady and calm. He returned minutes later with the corrected drink. Robert took a sip, grimaced, and set it down. Adequate, he muttered. I want the dry-aged porterhouse rare. If it's medium rare, I'm not paying for it. And bring me the wine list, but don't hover. Michael nodded and stepped back into the shadows of the dining room. Throughout the meal, Robert was a master class in misery. He complained the bread was stale, the music was too bass-heavy, and the lighting was too dim. Michael absorbed every insult with a stoic dignity that annoyed Robert even more. At one point, while cleaning the appetizer plates, Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket a violation of restaurant policy. It was the night nurse watching Lisa Micah's heart hammered against his ribs. He stepped away quickly to the server station, pretending to grab silverware, and checked the text. Her levels dropped slightly, but we stabilized her quickly. Michael closed his eyes, gripping the counter until his knuckles turned white. He needed this job. He needed the tips. He couldn't leave. He composed himself, put the phone away, and returned to table for... Robert was watching him with hawk-like intensity, the billionaire asked, his tone dripping with judgment. It's unprofessional to check your messages while on the floor. Michael looked the man in the eye. He wouldn't give this man his tragedy. It wasn't for sale. The check came at the end of the night. The total was $680. Michael watched from a distance as Robert pulled out a black titanium credit card. This was it. A standard 20% tip on this bill, plus the wine would be nearly $200. That was a week's worth of groceries or a fraction of the copay for Lisa S. Michael walked over to collect the leather folder after Robert stood up. The billionaire buttoned his jacket, looking at Michael with an unreadable expression. You have good posture, Robert said abruptly. Most of the staff here slouches. Before Michael could respond, Robert turned and walked out of the restaurant without a backward glance. Michael opened the folder, His stomach dropped to the floor. The receipt stared back at him. On the tip line, there was a single, aggressive horizontal slash 0. Below it, the total remained $680. Michael felt the blood rush to his face, a mix of humiliation and pure white-hot anger. He had endured 2 hours of degradation for nothing. The other servers were watching. He could feel their pity, which was worse than their mockery. James Smith, the manager, swooped in. Well, Michael didn't say a word. He just showed him the receipt. James Smith grimaced. Tough break. Brown. But clean that table. Michael wanted to throw the folder across the room. He wanted to quit, but the image of Lisa's face, pale against the white pillowcase, kept him rooted to the spot. He walked back to the table for his hands, shaking slightly, and began stacking the plates. He grabbed the linen napkin Robert had used and crumpled it in his fist. That was when he felt it. Something stiff was hidden beneath the charger plate, the heavy decorative dish that sat under the main course. It wasn't money. It was a thick, cream-colored business card, but it didn't have a company logo on it. Michael glanced around to ensure James Smith wasn't watching, then slid the card into his palm. On the back, written in jagged, hurried fountain pen ink, was a message. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't a shopping list. It read, "You didn't flinch when I insulted you. You didn't make excuses when I accused you. You have the discipline of a soldier, but the eyes of a man running out of time. If you want to change your reality, meet me at the West Side Shipyard, Dock 7, at 3 a.m. Come alone." Michael stared at the card. The West Side Shipyard was a desolate, industrial graveyard at night. It was dangerous, isolated, and completely irrational. Robert Williams was a billionaire. Why would he want to meet a waiter in the middle of the night at a shipping dock? It sounded like the setup for a crime or a sick joke. Michael checked his watch. It was 11:35 p.m. He had 3 hours and 25 minutes. He could go home, kiss his sleeping daughter, and try to forget the humiliation. Or he could take the wildest gamble of his life. He looked at the 0 on the receipt one last time. The anger in his chest cooled into a hard resolve. He wasn't just a waiter. He was a firefighter. He ran into burning buildings when everyone else was running out. He wasn't afraid of the dark. Michael finished his shift, changed into his street-clothes jeans and a worn leather jacket, and drove his battered sedan toward the waterfront. The West Side Shipyard was a labyrinth of rusted shipping containers and towering cranes that looked like skeletal dinosaurs against the moonlight. The wind coming off the lake was biting, cutting through Michael's jacket as he parked his car under a flickering street lamp. It was 2:57 a.m. Michael checked the tire iron in his trunk, considered taking it, then decided against it. If Robert Williams wanted to hurt him, he had the money to hire professionals who wouldn't be stopped by a piece of steel. Michael walked toward Dock 7, his firefighter boots crunching on the gravel. The silence of the shipyard was heavy, broken only by the distant groan of metal settling in the cold. Standing at the edge of the dock, looking out at the black water, was a solitary figure. Robert Williams was wrapped in a long wool coat, smoking a cigar that glowed like a dying ember in the dark. "You're early," Robert said without turning around. 3 minutes early. Michael stopped 12 feet away, keeping his distance. "I'm used to being ready before the alarm sounds," Michael replied, his voice echoing slightly off the metal containers. Robert turned, his face illuminated by the cigar's glow. He looked different, here less like a pampered tyrant and more like a predator in his natural habitat. "You're a firefighter," Robert stated, not asking. "I saw the calluses on your hands, the burn scar on your neck." Michael nodded. "Station 51. Robert dropped the cigar and crushed it beneath his expensive loafer. "Why? My daughter, Lisa, is sick," Michael said, the words tumbling out before he could stop them. "Interstitial lung disease. The treatment is experimental. Insurance denied it." Robert didn't offer sympathy. He didn't soften. Instead, he nodded, as if Michael had just confirmed a business calculation. "Desperation is a powerful fuel, Michael." Robert gestured toward a massive, dark warehouse looming behind them. It was the size of 2 football fields, old and imposing. "This represents my newest acquisition, a logistics hub for specialized chemical and biological materials. My safety directors tell me it's up to code. My insurance auditors say it's pristine." Robert locked eyes with Michael. "I don't trust suits. I trust eyes that have seen disaster. I want you to walk this building. You have 1 hour and 10 minutes. Find me the risk that everyone else missed. If you find nothing, I give you a cab fare home. It was a test." a bizarre, high-stakes test. Michael didn't hesitate. "Open the door," he said. Robert unlocked the side entrance, and Michael stepped into the darkness. Clicking on the heavy-duty flashlight he kept in his pocket, the beam cut through the dusty air, illuminating rows of chemical drums and high-stacked pallets. He ignored the obvious things. The fire extinguishers were tagged. The exits were marked. He looked deeper. He checked the ventilation shafts. He ran his hand along the sprinkler pipes. 40 minutes passed. Nothing. It looked compliant, but something nagged at him. The smell, beneath the scent of oil and cardboard, there was a faint, sweet chemical odor, acetoneosum more volatile. Michael followed the scent to the north wall, where a series of overflow containers were stacked. He climbed a service ladder to get a top-down view. There, hidden behind a wall of innocuous cardboard boxes, were unmarked green barrels. Michael scrambled down and inspected the piping running above them. It was a pressurized steam pipe for the heating system, radiating intense warmth. The barrels were stored directly beneath a continuous heat source in a dead air zone with no ventilation. He checked the labels. They had been painted over, but the hazard diamond was faintly visible. Class 3 flammable. Michael pulled out his knife and scraped the paint. Turbidiol, a highly unstable oxidizing agent used in polymers and known to decompose violently if heated. If the steam pipe leaked or the pressure spiked, these barrels wouldn't just burn. They would create an explosive vapor cloud. The entire warehouse was a bomb waiting to go off, and someone had deliberately hidden the barrels in a blind spot to avoid proper disposal costs. Michael ran back to the dock, his breath clouding in the cold air. He had 25 minutes left. Robert was waiting, checking his watch. The billionaire asked. There were 55 drums of tertibutyl hydroperoxide hidden behind the north partition, stored under an active steam pipe, Michael reported, his voice hard. If the pressure in that pipe spikes by just a few psi, or if the temperature rises, you won't have a warehouse. You'll have a toxic chemical explosion that will affect the entire waterfront. It's a code red violation. Robert stared at him, his expression unreadable. Then a slow, terrifying smile spread across his face. My nephew, David Miller, is in charge of disposal. He charged the company $3 million to safely process that waste. Robert reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a checkbook. He wrote on the hood of Michael's car, the pen scratching loudly in the quiet night. He tore the check out and handed it to Michael. Michael looked at the numbers. It wasn't for $10,000. It was for $65,000. "This is for the girl, Lisa," Robert said, his voice dropping the act. "And for the waiter who didn't punch me?" Robert stepped closer. "David is the vice president of operations. He's firmly, if I fire him without absolute crushing proof, he'll sue me for wrongful termination and drag this company through the mud. I need an insider. I'm just a firefighter," Michael said, holding the check that saved his daughter's life. "Exactly," Robert replied. "A figurehead role, or so David will think. I want you to infiltrate his operation. Find the paper trail. Find where the money went." Michael thought of the danger. Then he thought of the relief of paying the hospital bills, of getting Lisa the best care. Michael asked. "Tomorrow," Robert said, "quit the restaurant. Keep the fire station if you want. It keeps you sharp." The transition was jarring. Within a week, Michael was walking through the glass doors of Williams Industries, wearing a suit Robert had paid for. He met David Miller in the executive boardroom. David was 32, with slick-back blonde hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He looked at Michael with thinly veiled amusement. "So, you're the fireman my uncle found," David sneered, spinning a gold pen. "I'm here to ensure environmental compliance." "David," Michael said calmly. David laughed. "Sure. Just stay out of the way, Sparky." 4 weeks, Michael played the part of the clueless consultant. He wandered the offices, asking basic questions, letting David and his cronies mock him behind his back. But Michael was watching. He noticed who David texted during meetings. He noticed which files were never deleted. He noticed that David always carried a second encrypted phone. One evening, working late, Michael found a discrepancy in the transport logs. A trucking company called Chimera Logistics was billing Williams Industries for millions in hazardous waste removal, but the trucks never logged in at the main gate. Michael dug deeper. He used his old fire department contacts to run the license plates of the Chimera trucks. They didn't exist. They were ghost trucks. David wasn't just hiding waste. He was running a massive embezzlement scheme. billing the company for services never rendered and dumping toxic chemicals in cheap, unsafe storage units all over the city. Michael had the smoking gun. He printed the logs and prepared to take them to Robert. But as he walked to the elevator, his phone rang. It wasn't the hospital. It was David. Michael, buddy. David's voice was smooth, too smooth. I see you've been accessing the Chimera files. Michael stopped, his hand hovering over the elevator button. It's fraud, David. I wouldn't do that. David laughed darkly. You see, I did some digging too. I know about little Lisa. I know about your debts. And I know that $65,000 my uncle gave you. It looks a lot like a bribe, doesn't it? I've already flagged it with HR. If you release those files, I'll frame you for corporate I'll say you stole the data to sell to our competitors to pay off your debts. Who do you think the police will believe? Mikhail froze. The threat was real. David could ruin him. And if he went to jail, Lisa would have no one. Michael stood in the empty hallway, the hum of the server room buzzing in his ears like a swarm of hornets. David's threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. If Michael went to Robert now, David would spin the narrative. He would claim Michael was the thief, the blackmailer. The check Robert wrote was a personal check, but David could easily Dr. Emos to make it look like a payoff for stolen data. Michael felt the same tightening in his chest he felt when oxygen ran low in a burning room. Panic was death. Clarity was life. He hung up the phone without saying a word. He needed more than a paper trail now. He needed an undeniable physical proof that linked David directly to the crimes, something that couldn't be spun as a setup. He remembered the warehouse. David hadn't moved it yet because moving it was too risky while Michael was sniffing around. But now that Michael knew, David would have to act fast. He would have to destroy the evidence. Chimera Logistics. The name clicked in Michael's mind. A chimera is a mythical fire breather. David wasn't going to move the chemicals. He was going to burn them. He was going to torch the warehouse, claim it was an electrical accident, collect the insurance money, and destroy the evidence of the hazardous waste all in one strike. Michael checked the company's internal maintenance schedule on his tablet. A critical electrical repair had just been scheduled for the West Side warehouse for tonight at 11:30 p.m. The contractor, a subsidiary of Chimera Logistics. It was 10:30 p.m. Michael ran to the elevator. He didn't call Robert. David might be monitoring the lines. He didn't call the police. They would take too long to explain the corporate intrigue. He called Station 51. Captain, it's Brown. I need a crew at the West Side shipyard, Dock 7. Potential chemical arson. The captain didn't ask questions. Roll in, was all he said. Michael drove his sedan like it was a fire engine, weaving through traffic, his sirens purely in his mind. When he arrived at the shipyard, the gate was open. A utility truck was parked near the side door, the same door Michael had entered weeks ago. Michael grabbed a crowbar from his trunk and moved silently toward the entrance. Inside, he heard voices. Set the timers for 20 minutes. It was David. He was there personally to oversee the destruction. He was arrogant enough to want to watch the fire. Michael slipped inside, staying in the shadows of the pallets. He saw David and two large men near the main electrical junction box. They were rigging timed incendiary devices, thermite packs that would burn hot enough to melt the casing and ignite the nearby cardboard, which would then lead the fire inevitably to the hidden barrels of hydrogen. It was a bomb designed to look like a tragedy. Michael stepped out from the shadows, raising his phone, recording video. His voice boomed, echoing in the cavernous space. David spun around, his face twisted in shock. Brown, you idiot. He gestured to his men. Grab him. The two thugs charged. Michael didn't retreat. He was a firefighter. He spent his life hauling heavy hoses and breaking down steel doors. He swung the crowbar, hitting the first man in the shoulder, dropping him instantly. The second man tackled Michael, slamming him into a stack of pallets. The phone skid across the floor. They wrestled, fists flying. Michael took a heavy blow to the ribs, reigniting the pain of his old injury, but adrenaline masked the agony. He used his weight, flipping the attacker and delivering a solid punch to the jaw that knocked him cold. Michael scrambled up, breathless, wiping blood from his lip. David was holding a remote detonator. David screamed, his composure gone. Michael yelled back, stepping forward. Terbutyl hydroperoxide is an oxidizer. You hit that, and it's not a fire, it's a localized explosion. You don't know fire? David, I do. David hesitated, his hand shook. He was a businessman, a thief, not a killer prepared to die. In that split second of doubt, sirens wailed outside. Red and white lights flashed through the high windows, painting the warehouse in chaotic fire department. The PA system boomed. David panicked. He dropped the remote and bolted for the back exit. Michael didn't chase him. He dove for the remote to ensure it wasn't armed, then ran to the side door to let his crew in. Michael shouted to his captain, "Suspect fleeing north." Within minutes, police cruisers swarmed the lot. David was caught trying to climb a chain-link fence, his expensive suit torn and muddy. 2 hours later, Robert Williams arrived. The police had shown him the video from Michael's phone and the rigged incendiary devices. David was in handcuffs in the back of a squad car, screaming that it was all a mistake. Robert stood in front of Michael, who was sitting on the bumper of an ambulance, getting a cut on his forehead bandaged. The billionaire looked old, tired, but relieved. He looked at the warehouse, then at Michael. "You saved the building," Robert said quietly. "I saved the lives in the nearest 3 blocks, Michael corrected. Robert nodded slowly. "I owe you an apology, Michael. I put you in the lion's den because I knew you could survive it, but I didn't expect the lion to be my own flesh and blood. You risked your life tonight." Michael winced as the medic tightened the bandage. "It's the job, Robert." Robert reached out and shook Michael's hand firm, respectful grip between equals. "No more compliance specialists," Robert said firmly. "I'm firing the entire board of directors involved in David's scheme. I need a chief operating officer who actually cares if the company burns down. The job is yours. Triple the salary." Mike asked, the adrenaline finally fading, leaving him exhausted. "Full coverage," Robert promised. "I'm creating a new company policy tonight. Any employee with a sick child gets 100% medical coverage. No caps." They stood side by side, watching the hazmat teams work. 6 months later, Michael stood on the balcony of a new corporate headquarters. He wasn't wearing a waiter's uniform. He looked out at the city skyline. His phone buzzed. It was a video message from home. It was Lisa. She was sitting up in bed, new oxygen mask, coloring in a book. "Hi, Daddy." Michael smiled, tears pricking his eyes. He thought back to that night at the steakhouse, the exhaustion, the humiliation of the zero tip, the anger. He realized now that the zero wasn't an insult. It was a reset button. It was the moment his life hit rock bottom, so he could build a foundation for something stronger.